Hi, it's Jason from Blue Border Games here, and welcome to another video on my game Loot Legacy. This video is a bit of a designer's note, and I'll be talking through the board game that's used in the game. We'll also be talking about how we set up the loot tokens, those all important things that give you valuable victory points, as well then the terrain tiles that the fighters will be moving in and around. At the end of the video, I'll be giving some commentary as well on how I've made the ones you'll see in the video, and also the sort of terrain tiles you can use instead. So let's take a look at the board. So here we have the board for Loot Legacy that I use. This is a prototype, but it still follows the core principle of that I've set for designing this game, which is to keep things simple but still strategically challenging. So as I've mentioned in other videos, for this game I've gone away from the sort of tabletop skirmish miniature style of play where you have a game mat and you use measuring sticks, etc. to maneuver fighters around, as well as gauge range, etc. I've gone for a tile-based board, as you can see here. So what we have is a 12 by 12 tile board, and that board is split into two distinct areas. The first you can see is on the outer edge of the board, marked by the broken blue line, and this is where players will be placing their fighters once the board game has been set up, and it's the setting of that board game that this video deals with. So the important area for this video is the bit in the middle, and that is 10 tiles by 10 tiles. It's in here we'll be setting up the loot tokens, and it's in here that we'll be setting up the terrain tiles. On the other side of the board then you can see we have a game turn tracker, and that goes up to 8 because there are 8 game turns in a game of Loot Legacy. And then there are 2 separate victory point markers, one for player 1 or trackers, one for player 1 and one for player 2, and these go up to 10 because in the game of Loot Legacy, if you reach 10 victory points you are the victor, unless the game has reached the end of the 8th round, and that means then whoever has the most victory points will win the game. So now we're going to move on to the loot tokens, and in a game of Loot Legacy you have a total of 4 tokens to distribute on the game board, and these tokens that I've made here you'll be able to see are either from sort of off-the-shelf kits such as Terrain Crate that Mantic Games produces, or you can raid your bits box and create a sort of pile of weapons as this one does, or raid again the sprues of the dwarfs in Mantic Games, which actually give these great little chests that we've got here. But the point is you can actually use anything you want, as long as it signifies the loot, you're able to see it. It could be just a printed piece of card, but the key point is that each loot token only takes up 1 tile. Now, in order to determine where we place them, and they are randomly placed, we use 2d10. I'm using 2 different colours because it makes it easier, because we'll have the blue one indicating on the bottom axis as to which column where we look placing the loot token, and then the green then will use the one at the side in the same way, and where the 2 numbers cross will be where we'll be placing the loot token. So you roll the dice, we start on 7 and then we've got to 9, and we'll be placing 1 there. Got another one which goes 9 and 2, and then the third one, and this one is going on 8 to 6, and then the final one is actually 10 and 7. Oh, sorry, 7 and 10. So we've got 2 very close together there, and that's how you set up the loot tokens in the game. Again, they're always randomized, so nice and simple in how we do that, but it provides then, or begins to bring in that strategic challenge as to where our fighters going to be placing their fighters during the setup. And now we come to the terrain that we'll be using to create our sort of area of battle. And in Luton Legacy, again, trying to keep things simple, there are 3 types of terrain, or 3 sizes to be precise. So the first one is what we call a small one, and that occupies 3 tiles just like that. You then have a medium size which occupies 4 like that, and then you'll have a large which occupies up to the 2x3, which creates the 6. So again, you'll see the sort of variation in ones are made. These are actually wedding cake decorations. These again are from Terrain Crate. Just see the camera, and you can see that they're very much straight out the box. And then this one then, and this is the thing with the larger ones, you get the chance to make often a diorama. So there we've got the carriage of a cannon, some coffee stirrers to create sort of broken wood, and then again another chest from the sprue on the Mantic Dwarfs. Now, in order to determine how much terrain we have, each player will be rolling 2d6, and they'll be consulting the terrain setup table, or the terrain generation table, and that will tell us then how much each player will have available to place, and they will be making the decision as to how they place them. So if we roll for player 1, we can see a 1 and a 3 creates or generates 1 small for a 1, and for 3 it's going to be 1 medium. So we'll put them there into the camera, and then the next one for player 2 is going to be 1 again, which is a small one. You can see some variation. We've used again some garden stones, and then the 2 is in fact 2 smalls. So we'll just move that one in there, and player 2 will have those to set up. The 2 players then roll off a d6. The highest then gets to, typically, we'll roll again. The highest roll then gets the choice as to whether or not they will place a terrain piece first, and then it will go to the next player, or in fact they would want their opponent to. And I think as the opponent has 3, player 1 will decide in this instance that they can go first. And then each player just takes it in turn to randomly position their terrain pieces, or less randomly if they're being strategic, and so on and so forth until they've placed all their terrain pieces. Now, where you put your terrain is going to be very much down to individual preference, but the thing to remember in Luton Legacy is that you can deploy your fighters anywhere around the edge. So it's not like in sort of more traditional skirmish miniature games, or a lot that are out there, where they will come with preset scenarios with setup maps that show that one faction or warband is going to be positioned in one place, a part of the battlefield, and then another will be in another. In Luton Legacy, you could have them very close to each other. The only restriction is that you cannot place your fighter in an adjoining tile to an enemy fighter, but you can be within one. And this becomes quite an interesting decision to make when you're faced with a warband that has perhaps 1 or more ranged fighters. You might be creating more tighter setup, because terrain blocks line of sight in the game, but loot tokens do not. So that then completes the setup for a game of Luton Legacy, and then you would move on to deploy your fighters and play the game. So that gives you an insight into the board that we use in Luton Legacy, and also how we set up that board in terms of the loot tokens and the terrain tiles to play the game. As you can see, try to keep it simple. So There's no complications with what goes where. It's kept to a minimum in terms of the terrain types. So again, the small, medium and large, and the loot tokens are randomly selected and positioned so that there's no bias to one player or another. In terms of the terrain pieces, this is all very much a prototype, but as you'll have seen, I've used off-the-shelf terrain made by, in this case, Matic Games, but there's nothing stopping you using anything that's out there. And also, of course, those with 3D printers have an even more sort of infinite selection to look for. But you can keep it simple. You don't have to necessarily spend lots of money. A lot of the ones I've used use the sort of coffee stir sticks that you find in lots of coffee shops and other sort of takeaway chains. You can also use things that you just find in the garden, like the rocks, etc. And you can also use what I've used in the past is something called Hearst molds, I think. They are stone cast to give that sort of very sort of old school traditional look, as it were, in terms of the flagstones. But again, with 3D printing, the options are infinite, and you are left to imagine what you're going to sort of set your terrain sort of style on. And it could be a dwarf mounting hole that's fallen into rack of ruin, could be an abandoned mine shaft or workings, or it could be more thematic to one of the 3 clans that we've discussed. For example, with Clan Nocturne, they living at the bottom of the mountain. You could end up having sort of very lava themed and fiery sort of bases at the very least. So there's plenty of hobby options, as well as just going for a very simple printed version that you could easily generate with any of the AI tools that are out there. So I hope you've enjoyed the video and it's given you a little bit of a taster of how we begin the game. If it has, please like and of course subscribe to the video, and also please check out the rest of the videos on the channel, and there'll be lots more information you can find on how I'm developing, playtesting, progressing the game Loot & Legacy on the Blue Border Games Facebook page. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.